So in this short video, I want to answer a question about the baptism of Jesus that I don't think that we always consider, and that is the geography. Why exactly was Jesus baptized in the Jordan River? Of all the other places in Israel where he could have been baptized, why there? Well, the most obvious answer is, of course, that's where John the Baptist was baptizing, but that just begs the question, why was John there? Why did God send this last of the prophets, this new Elijah, to baptize in that particular place when he could have been baptizing anywhere else in Israel? Well, to get the answer to that question, you have to do something besides read the New Testament. You have to get the context of the New Testament. You have to read the backstory to the New Testament. In other words, you have to know the Old Testament to understand exactly why almost everything happens in the New Testament. That really is the context of the New Testament. Now, what do we see if we go back to the Old Testament that concerns the Jordan, that might answer that question as to why John baptized in the Jordan and why Jesus himself was baptized in the Jordan? Well, first of all, you go back all the way to the Torah, to the Pentateuch, to the story of Israel. Israel came out of Egypt. They spent 40 years in the wilderness. And then, before they entered into the promised land, they had to cross this liquid threshold, cross the Jordan River to leave death to enter life, to leave this place of sand and rocks and snakes and death to enter into the land that was flowing with milk and honey. And to do that, they had to cross the Jordan River. Well, what happened to the Jordan River when they crossed it? Well, if you remember the story, you can read about it in Joshua. The priest carried the Ark of the Covenant, and they walked into the Jordan River. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was the throne of God. It was the box that held the Ten Commandments and Aaron's staff and the jar of manna, and upon it were two winged cherubim facing each other, and this was considered to be the throne of Yahweh himself. So you can think of this as God entering into the water. And so when God stepped into the Jordan River, what happened? Well, the water split. This was like a second Red Sea. Just like the waters of the Red Sea split, so the waters of the Jordan split, so that the Israelites could pass through from death to life, from the old to the new, from promise to reality. Now, it was also at the Jordan River, later on, if you remember this story, where Elijah and Elisha came. And Elijah was taken up by God in the fiery chariot, and Elisha was left behind. So once again, you have the departure and the arrival. Elijah departs, the old goes away, and Elisha, the new, comes to take his place. So the Jordan River is a place of life and death. It's a place of departure and arrival, of promise and reality. Now, this all provides a background as to the geographical particularity of John's baptism of Jesus. That's why Jesus could not have been baptized anywhere else but in the Jordan River, because this fulfills the biblical narrative. So Jesus comes to John to be baptized in the Jordan River. And this is the fulfillment of all of these Old Testament stories. Because what happens in the baptism of Jesus? Well, John himself is from the priestly line, and he's the last of the Old Testament prophets, and he is the second Elijah. So he represents all of the old, and Jesus is the new. He is the fulfillment of the promise. He is the one who comes as the new Elisha. He is the one upon whom the Spirit rests as the anointed one of God. So John standing in the Jordan River and Jesus standing there with him is the bringing together of the old and new. It's the God departing with the old and bringing in everything new that comes with Christ. Now, it's no longer the Ark of the Covenant that stands in the Jordan River, the throne of God. It's God himself. It's the Word made flesh who now stands in the Jordan River. And it's not now the waters that part in his baptism, it's the heavens themselves that part, so that the Father can speak down, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And it's no longer two winged cherubim that are there, but instead it's the Spirit himself who comes in the form of a dove to alight upon Jesus as the anointed one of God. So Jesus puts himself into the Jordan. He puts himself into this liquid threshold between the old and the new in order that he might bring us out of our old life, out of sin, out of captivity, into the freedom and into the newness of life that we find in him. He puts himself into the Jordan River so that in our baptisms, he might place us inside himself. And in him, we enter into the promised land. We enter into the rest that Jesus himself gives to us. And so that's a short answer to why Jesus was baptized at the Jordan River, because it's at that particular place that all of Israel's history prepared us for. And it's at that particular place that Jesus comes to fulfill the promise by being baptized, by fulfilling all righteousness, and by placing us inside himself so that we might be the recipients of all the promises that he comes to fulfill as the Father's anointed one. So that's the reason why the Jordan River is so significant. Thanks for listening.